Imagine this. You stand in a dimly lit room, surrounded by shattered glass. The remnants of a life carefully built. Career, relationships, self-respect lie at your feet. You've spent years perfecting the art of kindness, of bending yourself into a shape others find palatable. You've swallowed your anger, muted your desires, and handed your power to anyone who asked. And yet, here you are, abandoned by the very people you sought to please, haunted by the question, did my goodness betray me? This is not a cautionary tale of malice, but of virtue weaponized. Dostoevsky's Prince Myshkin, the idiot of his novel, embodied this paradox. A man of almost divine compassion, he unraveled lives with his innocence, sparking chaos he never intended. His story is not an indictment of kindness, but a mirror held to the razor's edge of human interaction. What if the traits we call good are not virtues, but vulnerabilities? Consider the paradox. Society worships the agreeable, the selfless, the peacemakers. We teach children to play nice, to avoid conflict, to prioritize harmony. Yet history's most tragic figures, from Myshkin to real-world martyrs, are those whose purity of heart becomes a catalyst for their destruction. Why? Because kindness without boundaries is not morality. It is self-erasure. It is the silent scream of a soul so desperate to avoid rejection that it dissolves itself. You felt this tension, the coworker who heaps praise on a tyrannical boss, only to be exploited. The friend who forgives betrayal after betrayal, until their spirit fractures. The lover who sacrifices their dreams to soothe a partner's insecurities, only to wake up one day invisible. These are not isolated failures. They are symptoms of a collective delusion. The belief that to be good is to be passive, to be loving is to be limitless, to be noble is to surrender agency. But what if the opposite is true? What if the most radical act of love is not to dissolve, but to discern, to recognize that every yes to others is a no to yourself, and that the cost of infinite selflessness is the annihilation of the self? Dostoevsky's genius lies in exposing the violence of unchecked virtue. Myshkin's kindness is not just ineffective, it is corrosive. He pardons cruelty, rationalizes manipulation, and in doing so, normalizes the very evils he seeks to heal. His tragedy mirrors our own. We've conflated niceness with goodness, compliance with integrity. We've mistaken the absence of conflict for peace, the absence of desire for holiness. But here's the unsettling truth. Niceness is a performance, a social lubricant, a survival tactic, a way to avoid the messy work of asserting boundaries. True goodness, on the other hand, demands courage. The courage to disappoint, to confront, to choose oneself without apology. Myshkin lacked this courage. He confused love with approval, empathy with permission. And in that confusion, he lost everything. You might protest. Isn't the world brutal enough without adding more conflict? Isn't kindness a refuge from the dog-eat-dog grind of modern life? But this is the trap. Niceness becomes a shield, not to protect others, but to protect ourselves from the terror of rejection. We soften our edges to avoid being seen as difficult, selfish, ungrateful. We become human doormats, mistaking footprints for connection. The cost is staggering. Every suppressed no is a thread unraveling your identity. Every swallowed truth is a brick in the prison of your own making. You become a ghost in your own life, haunting the edges of your potential, wondering why your sacrifices never earned the loyalty, the love, the respect you craved. But what if the opposite is true? What if the most radical act of love is not to dissolve, but to discern, to recognize that every yes to others is a no to yourself, and that the cost of infinite selflessness is the annihilation of the self? Dostoevsky's genius lies in exposing the violence of unchecked virtue. Myshkin's kindness is not just ineffective, it is corrosive. He pardons cruelty, rationalizes manipulation, and in doing so, normalizes the very evils he seeks to heal. His tragedy mirrors our own. We've conflated niceness with goodness, compliance with integrity. We've mistaken the absence of conflict for peace, the absence of desire for holiness. But here's the unsettling truth. Niceness is a performance, a social lubricant, a survival tactic, a way to avoid the messy work of asserting boundaries. True goodness, on the other hand, demands courage, the courage to disappoint, to confront, to choose oneself without apology. Myshkin lacked this courage. He confused love with approval, empathy with permission. And in that confusion, he lost everything. You might protest. Isn't the world brutal enough without adding more conflict? Isn't kindness a refuge from the dog-eat-dog grind of modern life? But this is the trap. Niceness becomes a shield, not to protect others, but to protect ourselves from the terror of rejection. We soften our edges to avoid being seen as difficult, selfish, ungrateful. We become human doormats, mistaking footprints for connection. The cost is staggering. Every suppressed no is a thread unraveling your identity. Every swallowed truth is a brick in the prison of your own making. You become a ghost in your own life, haunting the edges of your potential, wondering why your sacrifices never earned the loyalty, the love, the respect you craved. This is the great question. What if the problem isn't the world, but the way we've been taught to survive in it? What if the call to be nice is not a moral imperative, but a cage? And what if escaping that cage requires not becoming harder, but more whole? You're standing at the edge of a revelation. The shards of glass around you, your shattered plans, your unspoken resentments, your lost opportunities, are not debris. They are fragments of a map to a self you've never fully claimed, a life you've never fully lived. The next step is not to clean up the mess, but to ask, what if the kindest thing you can do is stop being so nice? But to answer that, you must first descend deeper into the psychology of self-betrayal, into the philosophy of power, into the dark, fertile soil where true goodness takes root, not in the absence of conflict, but in the courage to choose. The compulsion to be too nice is not a personal failing. It is a cultural virus, engineered over centuries to pacify, to homogenize, to control. Its roots twist through the darkest corners of human psychology and philosophy, masquerading as virtue. To unravel it, we must descend into the labyrinth where selfhood is forged, the battleground between authenticity and assimilation. Consider the shadow self, as Carl Jung named it, that repository of desires, instincts, and truths we bury to earn belonging. The nice persona is not your essence. It is a mask sculpted by societal expectation. Every time you suppress anger, mute ambition, or laugh at a joke that gut punches your values, you feed the shadow. It grows bloated, volatile, until it erupts in passive aggression, self-sabotage, or a quiet collapse. This is the price of severing yourself from your wholeness. You become a walking contradiction, a fractured mirror reflecting everyone's needs but your own. But why does this fracture feel so inevitable? Because modernity weaponizes your longing for connection. Capitalism trains you to see yourself as a commodity, your worth tied to your usefulness. Social media reduces identity to performative agreeableness, where likability is currency. Even spirituality has been co-opted. The self-help industrial complex sells positivity as a panacea, pathologizing healthy anger or dissent as toxic. You are gaslit into believing that your discomfort is a flaw, not a signal. Nietzsche saw this coming. In On the Genealogy of Morals, he dissected the slave morality that equates meekness with goodness, a system designed to neuter the powerful, to elevate submission as a virtue. The too nice syndrome is slave morality in designer clothing. It whispers, to be kind is to be safe. To be safe is to be loved. But Nietzsche's warning reverberates. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster. When you weaponize niceness to avoid conflict, you become the monster of your own making, a hollowed-out shell, perpetually seeking approval to justify your existence. Schopenhauer, too, mapped this terrain. He saw compassion as the highest human faculty, but cautioned against its corruption into pity, a transactional empathy that reduces both giver and receiver to objects. When you help others to feel morally superior, or to manipulate loyalty, you strip them of dignity. You also strip yourself of agency, like Myshkin, who lavished gifts and forgiveness on those who despised him. You mistake self-abasement for altruism. And what of the existential cost? Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, argued that meaning arises from tension, the gap between what we are and what we should become. The too nice life rejects this tension. It seeks comfort in the illusion of harmony, avoiding the messy, necessary work of becoming. But without tension, there is no growth. Without growth, there is no self. You become Sartre's waiter who plays at being a waiter, a role performed so long it erases the human beneath. Even neuroscience betrays you. The brain's default mode network, responsible for self-referential thought, activates when you ruminate on social rejection. Evolution wired you to dread ostracism. In primal times, exile meant death. Today, that wiring traps you in a simulation. You tolerate emotional abuse to avoid the phantom pain of being cast out. Your prefrontal cortex knows the truth, that your worth is intrinsic. But your amygdala screams, comply, comply, comply. Huxley's Brave New World prophesied this dystopia. His soma-dazed citizens, tranquilized into complacency, mirror the modern addiction to niceness as a social sedative. To dissent is to risk instability. Better to numb yourself with performative kindness. But as Huxley wrote, the victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. You smile, you acquiesce, you shrink, and call it goodness. The hidden problem is not your niceness. It is the why behind it. It is the subconscious equation. If I am agreeable, I will be safe. If I am selfless, I will be loved. If I am invisible, I will not be hurt. This is the script's true horror. It trades your sovereignty for the illusion of security. And it works. Until it doesn't. Until the day you wake up, glass at your feet, wondering how your virtues became vices. But here's the crux. You cannot outrun this paradox by simply being meaner. That is a pendulum swing, not a solution. The roots run deeper, into the soil of identity, trauma, and societal conditioning. To reclaim yourself, you must first confront the forces that taught you to equate survival with self-erasure. This is where the rebellion begins. Not by burning the script, but by decoding it. By asking, who benefits when I silence myself? Who profits from my people-pleasing? The answers will unsettle you. They will implicate systems, relationships, even your own psyche. But they will also light the path forward, a path lined with the bones of old selves and the faint glow of something fiercer, truer, more alive. The next layer awaits. It is time to trace the consequences of this hidden problem, not just in shattered glass, but in the silent wars waged in boardrooms, bedrooms, and the chambers of your own heart. The cost of niceness is higher than you know, and the reckoning is closer than you think. You don't see the invasion until it's inside you. Niceness, when weaponized, becomes a silent occupation. It colonizes your instincts, rewires your reflexes, and replaces your desires with an algorithm of appeasement. You become a puppet of unspoken rules, dancing to a script written by ghosts. But the true horror isn't your compliance. It's how your compliance reshapes the world around you. Consider the cognitive dissonance of the people-pleaser. Every yes erodes your sense of self, but it also warps the social ecosystem. When you absorb others' emotional labor, you infantilize them. Colleagues never learn resilience because you've preempted their discomfort. Partners never confront their flaws because you've excused them. Friends stagnate in perpetual adolescence, their growth stunted by your refusal to challenge them. You've created a dystopia of dependency, where love is transactional and relationships are elaborate hostage negotiations. This is the shadow economy of niceness, a marketplace of unspoken debts and moral blackmail. You give endlessly, not out of generosity, but to accumulate social capital, to be owed, to be needed, to be safe. But safety is an illusion. The more you surrender, the hungrier the world becomes. Like Myshkin, whose kindness fueled the greed and despair of those around him, you become a narcotic. People crave your selflessness not for your sake, but for the intoxicating power it grants them. They punish you when you withdraw the supply, accusing you of betrayal. Your virtue becomes a cage, and your jailers are the very souls you sought to save. Neurology betrays the cost. Chronic suppression of anger and resentment doesn't dissolve them. It calcifies them into your cells. The stress hormone cortisol floods your body, eroding your health. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision-making, grows sluggish under the weight of unprocessed emotions. You develop autoimmune diseases, panic disorders, or a numbing depression. Your body's desperate scream for a self you've forgotten. Cultural conditioning amplifies the decay. Capitalism rewards the agreeable employee who works overtime without complaint, while punishing the difficult visionary who demands change. Social media algorithms elevate the non-threatening, the palatable, the sanitized, turning authenticity into a liability. Even activism becomes performative. Slacktivism, virtue signaling, the hollow theater of wokeness. You internalize the message. To be good is to be unthreatening. To be unthreatening is to be irrelevant. Schopenhauer's warning echoes here. Compassion is the basis of morality, but pity is the deadliest form of arrogance. When your kindness lacks discernment, it infantilizes others and degrades your own dignity. The CEO who tolerates toxic employees to avoid conflict creates a culture of abuse. The parent who shields children from all discomfort raises adults unequipped for life. The friend who lies to avoid hurting feelings fosters mistrust. Your niceness isn't just a personal failure. It's a ripple of harm distorting entire systems. And yet, the deepest consequence is existential. The self is not a fixed entity. It is a verb, an ongoing act of creation. Every suppressed desire, every silenced boundary, every swallowed truth erodes your capacity to choose. You become a habit, a series of conditioned responses. Your identity dissolves into a haze of shoulds and oughts. You look in the mirror and see a stranger, a collage of other people's expectations. This is the paradox Dostoevsky dissected. Myshkin's tragedy wasn't his kindness, but his inability to see where kindness ended and self-destruction began. He loved the world so completely that he vanished from it. His story is a warning. When you abandon discernment at the altar of virtue, you lose the ability to distinguish between love and masochism, between compassion and cowardice. The unseen consequences are everywhere. In the nonprofit leader who martyrs themselves for a cause, burning out while the system they fight remains unchanged. In the artist who molds their work to fit market demands, only to lose their voice. In the millions who smile through exhaustion, anxiety, despair, their faces curated for social media, their real selves buried under layers of performative wellness. But here's the crux. You cannot fix what you refuse to see. The world conditions you to ignore these costs, to dismiss your exhaustion as a personal failing. You're just stressed. You're overthinking. Stop being so sensitive. The script gaslights you into compliance, yet beneath the surface, a reckoning brews. Your body revolts. Your mind rebels. Relationships crumble. You hit a wall, a moment where the cost of niceness becomes undeniable. This is the turning point, the threshold of awakening. But awakening demands more than insight. It demands a revolution. The final layer of this labyrinth awaits. Not just the why or the how, but the what now. The map is in your hands. The glass shards of your old life glint in the dark, sharp and luminous. You've traced the invasion, felt its rot, glimpsed the prison of your own making. Now you stand at the edge of a choice, to rebuild yourself or to vanish entirely. The rebellion begins not with a scream, but with a question. What would you do if you weren't afraid to stop being nice? Choose carefully. The answer will either destroy you or set you free. The first act of rebellion is to stop calling it rebellion. You've been conditioned to see self-assertion as aggression, boundary setting as betrayal. But what if the true violence is the quiet erasure of your soul? Liberation begins not with a war cry, but with a whisper. What if I matter? This is not a self-help platitude. It is a seismic shift in consciousness. To break free, you must reclassify your pain. The exhaustion, the resentment, the gnawing emptiness. These are not flaws. They are alarm systems, screaming that your life is not your own. Your task is not to silence them, but to decode them. Start here. Anger is a compass. Society demonizes anger, yet it is the immune response of the psyche. When you swallow rage at being overlooked, exploited, or diminished, you commit spiritual suicide. Nietzsche's will to power was not a call to domination, but to becoming who you are. A process that demands confrontation. The too nice syndrome fears anger because it disrupts the illusion of control. But as Audre Lorde wrote, anger is loaded with information and energy. It tells you where you've compromised, whom you've allowed to cross lines, what parts of yourself you've orphaned. The next step is radical discernment. Kindness without boundaries is not virtue. It's negligence. To heal, you must distinguish between compassion, which honors both self and others, and complicity, which sacrifices self for false peace. When a friend repeatedly cancels plans, do you absorb their excuses, complicity, or say, I miss you, let's prioritize this? Compassion. When a colleague dumps work on you, do you smile and comply, complicity, or respond, I can't take this on right now? Compassion. Discernment is love in action. It requires the courage to disappoint. But courage is not the absence of fear. It's the mastery of it. Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in Nazi death camps, argued that between stimulus and response lies a space of choice. The too nice life collapses that space. Rebellion reclaims it. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you widen the gap between who you are and who the world tried to mold you into. This is the paradox of power. To serve others, you must first serve yourself. Rosa Parks didn't end segregation by being agreeable. She chose her seat, literally and metaphorically, and ignited a revolution. Similarly, the artist who refuses to pander, the activist who rejects performative allyship, the leader who admits vulnerability. These are acts of rebellion that redefine goodness. They understand that true service requires a self intact. The rebellion also demands holy indifference. Aldous Huxley spoke of this. A detachment from outcomes, not from engagement. You fight not for applause, but because integrity demands it. When you detach from others' approval, manipulation loses its grip. You can love fiercely without losing yourself. This is the essence of holy indifference, a stance of unwavering presence, unswayed by others' chaos. But the deepest work is shadow integration. Jung warned that the parts of yourself you disown become sub-personalities sabotaging your life. The nice persona is a fragment of your wholeness. To reclaim power, you must befriend your anger, your ambition, your unacceptable desires. Journal, meditate, create art. Scream into the void. Let the exiled parts of you breathe. As you integrate them, you'll discover a startling truth. Your sharp edges are not weapons. their wings. History's rebels understood this. Mandela refused to hate, but he also refused to comply. Malala Yousafzai didn't soften her voice. She amplified it. The Buddha renounced asceticism and found the middle way. Their power lay not in perfection, but in wholeness. You, too, must choose wholeness. This means no more outsourcing your worth. Your value is not determined by likes, compliance, or martyrdom. No more performative sacrifice. True generosity flows from abundance, not depletion. No more conflating niceness with goodness. Goodness requires discernment. Niceness requires nothing but self-denial. The rebellion will cost you. Relationships will fracture. You'll be called selfish, ungrateful, arrogant. Let them. As Nietzsche said, whoever wants to be a creator in good and evil must first be a destroyer. You are not destroying others. You're dismantling the internalized scripts that made you a stranger to yourself. Yet here's the alchemy. As you reclaim your power, you gift others permission to do the same. Your rebellion becomes a beacon. The colleague who stops tolerating abuse. The friend who chooses honesty over comfort. The child who grows up knowing their voice matters. But the final layer remains. The ultimate truth that redefines everything. You've burned the script. You've integrated the shadow. Now, you must confront the question haunting every rebel. What does it mean to live when you're finally free? The answer is not what you expect. You fought your way to the edge of the map. The shards of glass are gone, melted in the furnace of your becoming. But the real revelation isn't that you survived. It's that you were never meant to just survive. The ultimate truth is this. Your existence is not a problem to be solved. Every script you've ever followed, the cult of niceness, the religion of selflessness, the gospel of harmony, assumed you were broken. That your sharpness needed sanding, your desires needed taming, your voice needed softening. But what if the opposite is true? What if your flaws are not errors, but the very essence of your humanity? Dostoevsky's Myshkin failed because he believed in a world that demanded his erasure. He treated his own existence as a wound to be bandaged, a noise to be silenced. His tragedy was not his kindness, but his refusal to see that he too deserved to take up space. The final revelation is a mirror held to this lie. Goodness is not self-sacrifice. It's self-expression. When you stop trying to fix yourself, you awaken to a startling reality. Your anger is a guardian, not a monster. Your needs are sacred, not shameful. Your no is a hymn to the life you refused to live. The people who called you too much were not your judges. They were your teachers, revealing where you'd outsourced your sovereignty. This is the alchemy of awakening. You realize that the world's demand for your smallness was never about you. Systems thrive on compliance. Empires are built on suppressed voices. The nice script was never a moral code. It was a tool of control, designed to harvest your power and package your silence as virtue. But here's the cosmic joke. You were never powerful when you were nice. You were powerful when you stopped apologizing for existing. Nietzsche's amor fati, the love of fate, takes on new meaning here. To love your fate is not to embrace suffering, but to claim every facet of your humanity. The light, the shadow, the chaos, the grace. It is to stop segregating your emotions into good and bad, and instead see them as dialects of the same language, the language of you. Frankl's tension between who you are and who you could become dissolves into a dance. The friction that once tormented you becomes fuel. You no longer seek meaning in approval or purpose in self-denial. You seek it in the raw, unfiltered act of choosing, again and again, to show up as yourself. Even Sartre, the architect of existential dread, offers a hidden gift here. Freedom is the source from which all significations and all values spring. Your rebellion was never just about you. It was about reclaiming the birthright of every human. to be a fountain of meaning, not a mirror reflecting others' expectations. The final truth is not a destination. It's a lens. When you look through it, you see. Kindness without discernment is not love. It's fear wearing a halo. Peace without justice is not harmony. It's surrender in disguise. And you are not a problem to be managed. You are a force to be unleashed. This is the paradigm shift. You stop asking, "How can I be good enough?" and start asking, "How can I be fully alive?" The answer is not in the stars or self-help manuals. It's in the marrow of your bones, the fire in your gut, the quiet rebellion of existing exactly as you are. The cinematic conclusion unfolds in your mind. You see Myshkin not as a fool, but as a prophet. His tragedy was a warning, his demise a roadmap. You walk through the ruins of his world and build anew, not a utopia of perfection, but a sanctuary of wholeness. You realize, finally, that the cost of being too nice was never external. It was the slow erosion of your soul, and the reward for breaking free is not happiness, but something far greater. Aliveness, the messy, radiant, unapologetic experience of being a human undivided. Now that you know who you are, what will you do with the rest of forever? The answer is yours to write. Not in the ink of compliance, but in the blood of a life fully lived. If this video cracked open your psyche and left you trembling with recognition, you're not alone. Thousands are waking up to the rebellion, joining a silent army of those who refuse to vanish into the void of niceness. Subscribe to dive deeper into the labyrinth. Let these ideas stalk you. Let them haunt your quiet moments. Let them remake you. Comment with your raw truth. What part of yourself have you been taught to bury? Share a shard of your story. This isn't a conversation. It's a reckoning. The world needs your sharp edges, your unfiltered voice, your holy refusal to comply. Don't just consume this message. Live it. Subscribe. Comment. Rebel. And remember, the most dangerous thing you can do is disappear.